Okay, Benford's law. There's much literature being written on Benford's law. If you Google it, there's over 200,000 results. Benford's law forms part of many audit plans, and it's frequently used by auditors, but it's not very well understood. So hopefully today we can change that a bit. What is it? It analyzes digit and numerical data, helps identify anomalies, and it detects systematic manipulation of data. Systematic manipulation of data is just a polite way of saying making up numbers. And the anomaly is based on a digital distribution in a natural population. A natural population could be anything. It could be accounting numbers, or it could be cubic meters of water in all the lakes in North America. The lower the leading digit, the more frequently it will appear. For instance, the number 1 in 12, or the number 1 in 182, or the number 1 in 1098. The leading digit 1 should appear in the natural population about 30% of the time. Numbers starting with a digit 5 should appear about 7.9% of the time. And numbers starting with 9s will appear about 4.6% of the time. So basically what it would look like is this. The blue bars are the actual count of leading numbers. And the lines from top to bottom are from top to bottom is the upper expected limit, and the lower boundary of the expected distribution for Benford's law. Now, Frank Benford in 1938 wrote a paper on Benford's law, but because of lack of computing power, it never really got anywhere. Dr. Mark Negrini is currently the world expert in Benford's law. He's written a number of books and articles on the subject, and he's done really fun things like applying Benford's law on President Clinton's tax return, and did analysis to uncover problems in Enron's reported numbers. To understand it, this is the first digit test. It's a complex mathematical formula. For the first 2 digits test, the formula is even much more complex. Fortunately, for all of us, myself included, I have an intuitive example to explain it. Let's say there's $10. Let's say there's a $10 stock on the stock exchange, and it increases at 10% annually. Forget compounding, because it'll just give us all a headache if we try to calculate that. So to get from $10 to $20 at 10%, it would take 10 years or 100% increase before it goes from the leading digit 1 to the leading digit 2 in $20. From $20 to $30 at 10%, it will only take 5 years or a 50% increase to get to the leading digit 3. And from $30 to $40, it would take a little bit over 3 years to get to the leading digit of 4. So as you can see, the lower digit, like the 1, would stay on the stock market longer, and therefore there should be more of them. And that's why the lower the leading digit, the more frequently it will appear. Testing Benford's law. Apparently there's a website, very appropriate domain name, called testingbenfordslaw.com. And what it does is it displays the first leading digit from some public sources of large data sets. The red arrow, that's hard to see, but the red arrow here, and here, represents the expected distribution of Benford's law, and the yellow bar are the actual data. So there's a pull-down menu, and we'll take a look at Twitter users by follower count. As you can see, it complies to Benford's law. Most common iPhone passcodes, well, people choose those numbers, make up those numbers. So you would expect that if it's purely random, it would be equal distribution. But people have biases. because the number 1 and the 2 is near the top of the digital keypad, people choose 1 and 2 more often. And the 5 is in the center of the keypad, so they would choose the number 5 more often. It's these biases that makes Benford's law work well. Okay? Because Benford's law is good for detecting made-up numbers. Look at the UK government spending. We can see that it complies to Benford's law, and we'll just do one more. The 2011 Russian parliamentary election results, and I'll let you be the judge if the numbers are made up or not. Benford's law test consists of primary, advanced, and associated tests. These are the primary tests. The advanced test consists of summation, second order, and the associated test consists of last 2 digits, number duplication, and distortion factor model. All the tests, except the last 2, can automatically be executed from within the IDEA software. So we'll talk about the last 2 now, and we'll talk about the other ones later. The number duplication test identifies specific numbers causing spikes or anomalies in primary and summation tests. Spikes in primary tests are caused by some specific numbers occurring abnormally too often, as you saw in the iPhone passcodes. And spikes in summation tests are caused by abnormally large number in value. The distortion factor model shows whether the data has an excessive lower digit or higher digit. It assumes that the true number changed to a false number within the same range or percentage of the true number. There are some conditions required before Benford's law works. The number in the data set should describe the same object. In other words, you can't mix accounting data with the cubic meter of water in all the lakes in North America. There should be no built-in maximums or minimum. A maximum example could be your hourly parking rate that turns into a daily maximum. An example of minimum could be the 1 hour that your mechanic would charge you for labor even if he or she works on it for only 15 minutes or half an hour. And the number should not be assigned. Therefore, social insurance numbers, social security numbers, bank accounts, and telephone numbers will not meet the conditions of Benford's law. And it does not apply to uniform distribution like lottery balls, because it's numbers that are painted on the lottery balls, and it is the ball that is selected on the numbers. Now, most presentations and discussion talk about Benford's law detecting numbers near somebody's authorization limit. So if somebody can authorize up to $10,000 in expenditures, Benford's law would detect a lot of numbers that are in the 99, 98, 97, first 2-digit leading area. But you can use it for various things like accounts payable or expense data, non-arm's length transactions, or anti-money laundering. When you money launder, amounts goes through revenue, and people don't want to pay tax on the revenue, so they would make up a corresponding expense. And if there's enough of these made-up numbers, Benford's law would detect it. In fact, as a practical usage, even if the data doesn't actually comply to Benford's law, you can use it as an internal comparison or a benchmark. For instance, you can compare one period to the next. You can compare one division to another. And it's really great in detecting changes in accounting methods. The first 2-digit test is the most practical to use. The first digit is a very high-level test, and it's suitable for data sets with records of 300 or less. And the first 3-digit test, it's too detailed, and it will result in the need to investigate too many transactions. So first 2-digit test is the most practical to use, so I'll show you some examples of that. This is an accounts payable file from a large corporation. You can see that it more or less complies to Benford's law. The next one is it's an accounts receivable file, but it's from a car or auto manufacturer. You can see that there's some spikes around the 19 to 32 range. Well, it's an auto manufacturer. They sell cars to dealers at around $19,000 to $32,000. So even though there's a spike, if you understand the industry, you know that that's fine. This one does not comply to Benford's law. It's way out. Actually, this is a file that came with the Caseware Idea software. Obviously, they made up the data. And this one, I generated the data from using Benford's Wiz. Now, Benford's Wiz is a software that can create numbers meeting the Benford's law expected distribution. And I just want you to be aware, where we have a tool for detection, somebody will always come up with a tool to avoid detection. And this is where I picked up the software from. Using Benford's law and IDEA can provide a valuable, reasonable test for large data sets. IDEA only tests positive numbers 10 and over in data files. For negative numbers, values greater than -10 are excluded. So you exclude -9, -8, all the way down to -1. Some people think differently, so if I say for negative numbers, value less than -10 are excluded, so you would include -11, -12, -100. So people think differently. It's like when you arrive at the airport to depart to your destination. You're driving along, and where do you go? Under the arrival sign or the departure sign? So sometimes it gets confusing. You don't know whether you're coming or going. These steps eliminate immaterial items from the analysis, that is, eliminating the tens. Positive and negative numbers are evaluated separately, as the motivation to manipulate is the opposite for each type. So for instance, where financial result numbers are positive, management may wish to report higher amounts for the purposes of bonuses or to benefit the stock prices. Where the financial result numbers are negative, management may want to move it up closer to zero. Using Benford's law and IDEA, well, there's primary and advanced and associated tests that are built in. Results that show a poor fit to Benford's law should be examined closely, as it's an indicator of anomalies and excessive duplications. In IDEA, there's a check mark against the word suspicious. IDEA will highlight highly suspicious and suspicious transactions for you. So the advanced test, which is a summation test, this test analyzes the first two digits in the data by grouping the records of the first two digits together and adding them. So for instance, amounts of the same first two digits, like 1200 and 125, they're added together. And then the computed summation value, the process then determines whether there's a uniform distribution or not. The summation test identifies excessively large numbers compared to the rest of the data. The test is based on sums rather than on counts. All the other Benford's law tests are based on counts. So in theory, the sum of the numbers of the first two digits should be equal in weight in distribution. But in actual data, there's actually normal, abnormal duplication of large numbers, whether they be a very few very large numbers or high volume of moderately large numbers in the data set. So you would need additional analysis. Another advanced test is the second order test. And this test is based on the first two digits also, but it's sorted from the lowest to the highest, and it takes the difference of the two consecutive numbers, and then it's determined whether it meets the expectation of the first two digits test in Benford's law or not. So the differences are expected to approximate the digit frequency in Benford's law. The last two digit test is an associated test, and what it does, it groups the last two digits of the number and compute the frequency to check whether it follows a uniform distribution. It'll be a lot easier when I show you an example. So this is the first two digits test result. It's a primate test, as we've seen in earlier examples. You can see that if you can see the red bars, they're the highly suspicious numbers, that idea flags. The yellow bar are suspicious numbers, that idea flags. And if you click on any of the bars, for instance the red bar, it can either extract or display the suspicious records for you. This is an example of the summation test. And again, the summation test takes the first two digits and add them up. And again, idea highlights the highly suspicious and suspicious numbers for you. This is the second order test. It's the accounts payable file that we saw earlier. And the even tens, that is the 10, 20, 30, all the way to 90, they're known as prime digits, and it conforms to the first two-digit Benford's test. Now, note while all the numbers, other than with the exception of the even tens, it's below the expected distribution, they are also in line with the first two-digit test, and they're known as the minor digits. This is also the same accounts payable file, but using the last two-digit test. And you can see that in this case, the payable file, there's lots of numbers that ends with 00. Usage considerations. Well, first of all, you should remove all the amounts less than $10. But IDEA does that for you already. So users must consider whether a particular data set should be expected to fall into a Benford distribution. In other words, it has to be the same object. There's no minimum or maximums, and they should not be assigned numbers. What tests should be run, and how should the results of those tests be interpreted? Well, there are costs associated with false positive, that is, identifying a fraud condition when none exists. There's also costs associated with false negative, that is, where there's a fraud condition and it's not detected. So one must consider the level of significance to select for further investigation, because you don't want to investigate too many transactions, it's time consuming, and of course you don't want to investigate too few because you may miss something. When is Benford law ineffective? Well, are there categories of fraud that cannot be detected using Benford's law? It's not appropriate for detecting deletions. It's good for detecting made-up numbers. So Benford's law analysis, when used correctly, it's a powerful tool for identifying suspect accounts or amounts for further analysis. The tool is great for initial risk assessment. It gives the auditor or the investigator a good place to start. But it's just a tool, and it should complement other tools and tests. And users have to gain expertise in interpreting results, because as you saw from the accounts receivable file of the auto manufacturer, there's some spikes, but if you understand the business, then you would understand that's not an anomaly. So this is a picture of Frank Benford, Frank Benford's house. It gets better. Picture of Dr. Mark Negrini making a pilgrimage to Frank Benford's house. And you notice he's pointing to the address. Leading digit, what is it? 1, most frequently appear. But if you were a fraud investigator, what would you notice about that address? That's right. The number 1 looks a little bit smaller than the other digits. So I don't know whether it's staged or it fell off and they replaced it or not. Thank you. Yes.
When we're looking for, when we are running Benford's law, do we just pick a random sample, or what basis do you pick your sample
You apply on the entire data set.
on the entire data set?
You don't need to pick a sample because the purpose of Benford's law is to identify the anomalies in the entire data set for you. Now, it would be, are you still recording? Okay. It would be really nice if IDEA can create a Benford's law subset. In other words, if you have a vendor file, let's say there's 1,000 vendors, it would apply Benford's law on each of the vendors. That would be nice. But right now, IDEA only applies it to the entire data set.
Okay. So we can't just apply it to a specific...
Well, the way you do that now is you have to extract each vendor and then you apply Benford's law on each. It would be nice if it was automated. Any other questions?
Do you know if there are any differences between 8.5 and 9 as far as Benford's law goes?
Yes, there's some additional advanced tests and associated tests that were not included in the previous version. In the previous version, 8.5, it only included the primary test, that is the first digit, first 2-digit, first 3-digit, and second digit test. Subsequently, in version 9, it included the summation test and the other test that we talked about earlier. Yes?
Well, the new version 9 Benford law, IDEA will help the clients more compared to the old previous version.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Just the fact alone that IDEA highlights in red the highly suspicious numbers and in yellow the suspicious numbers, it gives an inexperienced Benford's law user a place to start rather than seeing every little spike, because some people would think, oh, you know what, this is just that much above the expected distribution, so I should investigate it. No. The new version of IDEA will highlight the more riskier numbers for them to look at. And again, they can just click on that bar and it'll display or extract those suspicious numbers or highly suspicious numbers. Any more questions? I can take off this tie now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.